Welcome to Inside the Hobby. I'm your host, Scott Yeager. This week, we're going to be talking about the world of consignments. And who better to join us to talk about that subject than the head of consignments here at Goldin Auctions. We're talking about Dave Amerman, who has such a long history in the consignment world. And he's going to go over some items, talk a little bit about what they might be worth, and then also he's going to share some of the wackier items he's been brought over the years. Dave, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Scott. Appreciate it.
So we're going to talk a lot about consignments today, but first and foremost, I'd love to hear about how you got into the hobby.
I got into the hobby just like most people that I know. You know, honestly, I have an older brother. We started collecting. He started card collection maybe when he was about 8 or 9, and I saw his cards starting to stack up, so I wanted to jump in and get some cards myself. So my grandma took me to the local card store, and ever since then I was hooked, going into Walgreens, buying 5 1991 Fleer packs for $1 and pulling the black cards, and ever since then I just stayed in it, and I've just been a lifelong collector. I just love the hobby, love the stats on the backs of the cards, love everything about it.
So you're currently head of consignments here at Goldin, and you have such an interesting position within the hobby because you're often helping other people sort of on their journey to selling their items, obtaining other items. Explain what consignments are, what your role in it is to sort of the layman who maybe hears the word all the time like I do, but doesn't really understand it completely.
Absolutely. What we do here at Goldin is we run a high-end auction house, so we can help people sell their items and actually get cash for those collectibles. Some people have had these items for decades. Some have had them for centuries in their family. Some people just pulled them from a pack last week and they want to monetize and get that value. There's plenty of ways these days to get money for your collectibles. There's forums, there's all sorts of different ways, but I've always been a believer in the auction route to get the money that your card deserves, get it out there, get the exposure, and truly sell it, and whatever it's worth, that's what they're going to pay for it. So here at Goldin, I actually help people bring their items to life, get them on board here, and get them into one of our auctions.
So when you fell in love with the hobby, you started getting into it yourself. What were sort of your first jobs or the first way that you realized you had this skill set to help people take an item that they might not necessarily be able to properly assess that value point and, be able to do more for them than maybe they could do if they were left to their own devices? What got you to where you are today?
I actually learned from myself first, because I think anyone who's going to be guiding someone has got to take their lumps. They got to know what they're doing themselves. So I was actually in the mid-90s on forums. Beckett had a forum. There was plenty of others where I would go on and I would trade cards. I was trading $100 cards back when I was in middle school with adults. There was no tracking. You just send it through the mail and hope the guy on the other end was honest. So it was a little bit primitive then. Then eBay came out and kind of, started buying things. I was amazed because these are things that you read in magazines and now all of a sudden they're online. So as soon as I was able to find the cards I was looking for from a young age, rather than having to go to the local show and dig through the dealer's booths, I was kind of hooked. And I realized right away as a seller, I was okay. It wasn't great. I definitely lost some big money on some things. Even when I got into high school and college, I lost thousands on certain items just learning the ropes. And I realized, that this was kind of my calling. I started my own auction house when I was 23, and I was able to use what I knew. I thought I didn't know anything. Honestly, I was like, look, I'm new to this. I've been collecting for like 10 years. I didn't realize at that point, even at that time, in my early 20s, I was able to advise adults on their collectibles and professional athletes who had cards. And my first auction, we set the record for the 3rd highest football card sale ever. I was on the cover of Beckett magazine, working from home, and I just kind of realized this is a niche that, I was pretty decent at, and I think it's just because I obsessed over the cards and the values, and I just really cared about it and looked it up all day, every day.
Now, something that comes up fairly often in conversation when it comes to the hobby is this sort of boom period we're in or have been in the last year or so. So many new people getting into the hobby. I'd imagine new people buying things, but also new people getting the idea to maybe sell some things that they've had for a while. Has it become easier or harder for you to now deal with a whole new crop of people who might not get how this industry works?
It definitely possesses its challenges. There's nothing like a guy who's been selling for 20, 30 years. He knows what he's getting into when he consigns in an auction. There's a risk-reward scenario with every auction. So there's always that pit in your stomach when you have $10,000, $20,000 or more on the line and your item's only 20% of the value leading into the final day. So there's always going to be the nerves. Now, when you're dealing with a seasoned collector who understands the risks and knows what he's signing up for right away, he gets it. He doesn't think every single buy I ever make, I'm going to make money on. With the consignment for the auction, it's kind of the same process. If you have 20 items in an auction, the chance of you getting 15 to make some money on and maybe breaking even or maybe even being down on 4 or 5 is going to be better than if you got one big money item and all your chips are riding on that item. So with the newer collector, it's an experience they haven't been through yet. So we have to really walk them through the process and guide them, and that starts with the communication on explaining the process up front and how it works, taking them through the auctions and taking them through the cycles. Guys, this is the second week of the auction. I know that it feels like it's been live for a week or 2 weeks, which it has, and it feels like an eternity, but nothing is really going to get going here until the final hours when people compete. Everyone's worried about pricing. So, just kind of helping them go through that process and making sure they know what they're signing up for and getting into is really the challenge, or at least, that's what I can present. And I'm bluntly honest. So, if I speak to somebody about what's going on or what we have coming up and I let them know, I can't predict the value of every card. We realize that. So all I can do is put your card in the best setting and at least make sure you understand what you're going through during that time.
What are some ways that you find yourself, maybe upgrading an item, whether it's, a grading or an authentication or a photo match, stuff like that? What's a common way someone might bring you an item where it's not necessarily finished auction ready, where you might be able to add value to it by just saying, maybe add this step here, maybe, kind of jazz it up a little bit?
Definitely. That's another reason why you'd come to a Goldin Auctions. You get to deal with a live person, and I can sit there and look at it like if it was mine and say, hey, if this is mine, this is a decent grade, but, you've got 295 subgrades and 210s, maybe we can cross this. I just took on a collection of all gem mint graded cards. So you would think, okay, these are the top level cards. And as I'm going through them, I said, look, let's send 50 of these cards to Mike Baker and get some gold and diamond revisions on those and some stickers. Let's send these PSA 10s over to Beckett and see if we can get some black labels or some pristine grades. So those are certainly some ways we can look at cards that seem like they're at the top of the ladder and add some value. A great story was the Kobe Bryant rookie jersey that was consigned to us for the previous auction. That jersey came to us unauthenticated. It was just a jersey from the rookie season. We looked at it and said, look, if I can't photo match it, first it was we're going to try to photo match it. If I can't, we're going to have to go to mirrors. If we go to mirrors, we're looking at maybe 50 to 100 grand. If we can photo match it, we know we're at a 6-figure value and well above. So we didn't even know what we were going to have to present. And sure enough, it photo matched to the preseason photo shoot and 7 games during the regular season early on. So we ended up getting $3.69 million for the jersey. And that's just, it was a great feeling to get a text the next day from the consignor basically saying, wow. And I was like, yeah, we didn't make you a few $100,000. You don't have to work anymore. And that was a good feeling.
Let's talk about a different kind of mistake that a seller can sometimes make in this industry. You talked before about realistic expectations for a seller, how much an item might fetch at one particular time, but Lord knows something might feel like a lot of money at one point, but then a few years down the line, oops, probably shouldn't have let that go. We're going to go to a clip from our very own Ken Goldin where he talks about the card he will never forget.
Hi, I'm Ken Goldin, and the card I will never forget is the T206 Honus Wagner. The T206 Honus Wagner is probably the most famous and legendary card in history. Everyone's seen various copies of the card. What most people probably haven't seen or know is that there exists an uncut strip of that card. The strip features Honus Wagner, Cy Young, Three Finger Brown, and 2 other players. The strip is called a proof, and it's blank back. And this is what they used to create the cards. The strip was sent to Honus Wagner as proof that the American Tobacco Company pulled his card from production. It was held in the Wagner family until probably the 1970s. The uncut strip came up for auction in 2000, and I purchased it, meaning that as opposed to owning one of 50 T206 Honus Wagners in the world, I owned a one-of-a-kind uncut strip with the famous Holy Grail on it. I kept it and treasured it for about 8 years, and then in 2008, with the downturn in the economy, the banking crisis, people came to me with a offer of $150,000 for the strip, which was more than I paid, and considering I've had it in a bank vault for 8 years, didn't know I was going to form Goldin Auctions, I decided to let it go. Unfortunately for me, today that uncut strip is worth about $4 million.
And if that doesn't tell you that timing is everything in this hobby, I don't know what does, Dave. $150,000 sale feels like a great, take there, and then a few years later, $4 million piece. Can you relate to Ken at all there? I mean, talk about some moments in your past, things that maybe you sold too early, that might strike a chord with.
Yeah, I think that is a very familiar situation in this business, especially being in it as long as I have. I've owned Ty Cobb. I owned a Joe Jackson Cracker Jack 1914, got $7,500 for it, thought I absolutely killed it. Card went to $25K within a couple years. But just recently, the cards have gone up so much, and I look back and think of how many Hank Aaron rookies or Joe Jackson cards or any of those Jackie Robinson rookies I've had and sold them. I made money on a lot of the items that I've sold, but if I just kept a quarter of the items I had, I'd be in better shape. I actually gave a birthday gift to an employee of mine, a Kevin Durant Topps Chrome X-Fractor, paid $100 for it, and the card traded for $75,000 this year. So that was a nice gift, and luckily he was a pretty good friend, so he deserved it.
It's so important, Dave, for a seller to have someone like you on their side to give them a true assessment of an item, how much it might be worth, what they can do to help that value, when a good time to try to put it on the market is. So we're going to play a little game called What's It Worth, where you've brought some items with you today. You're going to tell them what you think they are worth and why.
All right, this first card is actually, it was produced in 1997 from a sticker box, an innocent child's sticker box. And it is the 1997 Rocky Maivia Wrestling Super Stickers. Now, here's what I love about this. This card, a couple years ago, you might have been sifting through and thought this was a couple $100 at best. You might have not even known who Rocky Maivia was. This is actually Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, his true wrestling rookie card. What makes this valuable is the fact that it's centered and it's graded a 10 by PSA. These oftentimes were off-centered. They come in, again, they were sticker boxes that were sold for $50 to $100 in department stores. But to find a 10, there's only 5 population PSA 10s. There was a few recently submitted. There was only 2 as of a couple months ago, and we sold a PSA 10 Rocky Maivia rookie for $33,000 in auction.
Being somebody who definitely had this, has no idea where it is at this point, and also had now there's another one, there's a trivia game Rocky Maivia card too that somehow goes for not as much as this, but a nice chunk of change. What is it about the wrestling cards where it's not necessarily a pack card that becomes someone's rookie? You get a sticker, you get a trivia card. Why are these cards considered rookie cards even though they come in such atypical scenarios?
I think it's because wrestling cards were not necessarily mainstream. Even though they've been producing wrestling cards for decades, they can go back to the 70s. The 80s were very popular issue of wrestling cards. You had the Hulk. You have the Hulk rookies have been going crazy, and Andre the Giants, those have been going for $50K plus. So I think people are trying to look to see what they can relate to as a child watching wrestling. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with non-baseball or, big mainstream sports, you got to look outside the box and kind of figure what could have been classified a card. A lot of times they were issues from Sports Illustrated where they ripped the cards out. So because there isn't a main Topps or issue, Panini, who has all the trading card for the NBA licenses right now, this is as mainstream of an issue as it gets. So the trivia cards and other ones, they're rare, they're hard to find. And right now people are looking for something unique. They've seen the Ken Griffey Jr. rookies, the Michael Jordan rookies. They're looking for something a little outside the box that they can relate to, and this one hits home with a lot of people apparently, and over $30,000 to buy one of these.
Yeah, it helps when you're good at absolutely everything. All right, what do we got for our next item here to chat about today?
This next item is from 1960, and it's from Hemmett's Journal. So going back to the conversation about a card not necessarily coming from a pack, this came from a home journal in Sweden. That was what this stands for. And this is the Olympic year from Cassius Clay, who then became Muhammad Ali when he won his gold medal in Rome. This card is graded a 9, and there's only 10 9 examples in the world. So again, this comes from a magazine in Sweden. Not many people kept these around. There are a few hundred in circulation, but this card in its condition, being as rare as it is, it has a book value of $130,000. And just because it has a book value, that doesn't mean there's only 10, so they're not actively traded. This card could fetch $150,000 to $200,000 to the right collector.
And when we talk about, we kind of moved from the world of wrestling to the world of boxing. Is Muhammad Ali, is he the golden goose here? A lot of people consider him to be the GOAT and especially the biggest personality, at least from the world of boxing. Is it his items that fetch the most overall within the hobby?
The issue with Muhammad Ali is that he signed a lot of autographs, and he was out
I got
there.
one right here.
There you go. So yes, he worked with Steiner Sports and Online Authentics and all sorts of other companies signing for a while. So his autograph value, while it's still up there in the scope of boxing, it's more accessible. So that makes a difference. Now, when you talk about trading cards, because there wasn't really many boxing issues at all in the 60s, his early 60s and mid 60s and even 70s issues are pretty valuable, and you certainly would have to consider Muhammad Ali the GOAT of boxing. So I think what happened with boxing, though, is we saw some Mike Tyson rookie cards sell for crazy amounts, and now Floyd Mayweather rookie cards are selling for $30K plus. So when people see that, then they go back and say, well, then what's the Muhammad Ali rookie worth? And sure enough, this card here is pretty much one of the most expensive boxing cards of all time. There are a few earlier issues, a 48 Leaf Rocky Graziano and some things like that that may be more valuable. But this card in the 9 condition, only 9 other examples around, has to be one of the most sought after boxing cards of all time.
I'd love to ask something about what you just said about autographs, because that was sort of my introduction to the hobby. Is I fell in love with autograph pieces and something big and sexy that you can put on the wall, and then come to find out when you learn more about the hobby that it's sometimes the unsigned items that are just more rare that, you know, fetch a higher value, because as you mentioned, someone as great as Muhammad Ali or a Magic Johnson, they're out there signing a lot. So when you talk about the population out there, it's not as hard to come by as something from a journal from 50 years ago. So talk about that. Is that a misconception that most people think the bigger the item or the bigger the signature or being signed at all can help something's value, whereas sometimes it really doesn't matter too much?
It definitely is a misconception. Bigger is better used to always be the way things went. Bigger is better. I mean, as you can see behind me here, I've got my Mark McGuire that I'm a fan of growing up, and that was usually the school of thought. You know, if you have the big house and you can put it on the walls and you get the painted Leroy Neiman serigraphs and you have these massive items, that's really nice and it displays great. But when you go to sell them, you start realizing, oh wait, I have to ship this thing. I hope it doesn't get broken. I have to box it. I have to do all this work. And that's when it becomes difficult to sell it. So I think when people are thinking of collectibles, how many 40 by 30 frames are you going to be able to put in your collection? Sooner or later, the wife or someone's going to say, hey, get these things out of here. So with trading cards and smaller items, people can put them in boxes. They can put them in their closets. They can ship them very easily. It's a lot easier to store, or a safety deposit box or a vault or things like that, and it takes up less space. I've gone and uncovered entire storage units that are worth 30 grand, or I get one package in the mail that's worth 30 grand and it took nothing to get to me, as opposed to a day of digging and things like that. So the trend has definitely shifted. In terms of the autographs and the amount of signings affecting the value, of course. Now, we know Jordan probably signed a ton. We know some of these guys that signed a ton, LeBron. Those autographs are holding in value because of the demand. But when you think of like a Mickey Mantle versus Roger Maris, there's a reason why Roger Maris' autograph is worth 3 to 5 times that of Mickey Mantle on a single-signed baseball, if not more, because Maris died in the early 1980s when Mantle lived an extra 15 years, or approximately, and he lived through the Upper Deck and through the Steiner, through the signing days, where really in the late 80s, early 90s, people like DiMaggio started signing a lot. So that's why an autograph would be worth different. But you know, it really just depends on the perspective of the buyer. Autographs can enhance value. A lot of people said, don't get your rookie card signed, so nobody did. And then the players started passing away, and there's only a few rookie cards signed of these athletes like Mickey Mantle or Hank Aaron. Now, when someone goes to a show and they add the inscription, or on a baseball they add some inscriptions, now you can have the same guy who signed that same item. It's worth 10 times the amount of money because he is the only one with that really curse word inscription or something unique. So it's definitely a good idea to try to be a little bit different than everybody else.
Speaking of unique and normal items, you know, we do often talk about sports on the show and in this hobby, but we're going to talk about guys who don't necessarily fly through the air in the ring. They fly through the literal air. The Wright brothers. You have an item here from them.
Yeah, this is a really unique piece. It's actually encapsulated, and this is from the Wright Flyer, which was the first heavier than air, I guess you can say, mechanical item that flew. And this is actually authenticated. It's encapsulated by a reputable company, and it's just a small 2 by 2 inch piece of the fabric that actually flew on the wing during one of the first flights ever. Now, this is something that, to me, can't be replicated, can't be produced. This is not something put in a sticker box and sent out to every country across the world. This is one of a kind, very unique. Now, there obviously, because it's cut down, there were several of these that were produced, so more than one person can be afforded the opportunity to own a piece of history. But when it comes to uniqueness and rarity, this item right here, I love this because the value, you would think it's a little 2-inch by 2-inch vinyl cloth, more or less. What could this thing possibly be worth? We sold just a little square, just like this right here, for $8,800 in auction. So that's definitely one way to monetize the fabric that may have been, laying around in a factory or, on display, so that individuals can own it. And people love to fractionalize things and just want a piece. And again, it's shippable. You don't have to put the entire plane up on the wall on display. It's not, you don't have to rent a garage for it or anything. So this is just a way that, how cool is that? You have a party or something, you want to impress your friends, and you pull out a piece of history that's over 100 years old. So, I'm glad that these type of items are starting to get more and more respect because, it is pretty unfathomable that a card produced in 2020 that was pulled out of a pack there may have been hundreds of could be outselling these one-of-a-kind artifacts from hundreds of years ago. And, it's good to see that people are starting to get back into these items and realize the true rarity because that's what drives value is rarity if again, supply and demand. So, and of course you have to be into it. Everybody knows that flying is an incredible accomplishment for, human beings in general. So, it's definitely one that transcends sport. And, I'm a member of the International Society of Appraisers, and one of the big things that we focus on when doing appraisals is comparable sales and historical sales history. Now, obviously with things that you don't have that's why you have to go to the auction, and really the values we're going to give are going to be guides in our experience, but that's why I love to see an item that starts at a couple hundred selling for 5 figures, if not 6 figures, which we've seen plenty here.
All right, let's come back down to earth. Let's land this plane back in the sports world. Another athlete that is near and dear to my heart. I've got him over there. Mike Trout, you've got a card of who many consider to be the best baseball player of his generation, currently on the sidelines with an injury. But what card are we looking at here?
This is a 2012 Prism Mike Trout finite. So this is numbered to 1 of 1, and it's graded a 9.5 gem mint by Beckett. The reason why I like this card in particular is Goldin Auctions kind of set the bar in the trading card hobby when we sold the Mike Trout Superfractor from 2009, and we fetched around $4 million for the card when nobody thought that number was attainable. So this card here is not quite the Bowman Chrome issue. This is the Prism, but Prism has gained a lot of respect, the Panini brand, in the basketball card market and even in the baseball card market with this 2012 issue, which was their first issue. So 2012 basketball Prisms, we've sold the Prism Gold for $400,000 of LeBron, not even a rookie card. This being Mike Trout's first Prism card, a 1 of 1. This card is actually, it's tough to put a number on it. We're going to find out pretty soon the absolute value, but this card is already well over $50,000, and we anticipate a 6-figure final figure on this Trout card, so it'll be interesting to see. Even sidelined with an injury, the respect for Mike Trout collectibles is continuing to go sky high, and we might see several multiples of 6 figures as well, when all's said and done on this sale.
So Mike Trout's such an interesting case for me because obviously, MVP winner, as I said, many consider to be the best individual player in his sport, but so many other greats like Tom Brady and LeBron James is tied to winning championships, and Mike Trout hasn't really come close yet. Is he somebody who, if he finally won a championship or even made it to a World Series, could his value skyrocket even further? Or do you think he's managed to fetch these values without getting to that level and, it wouldn't necessarily impact it as much as it would for another player? I'm fascinated by that since he hasn't really gotten even into that stratosphere yet, and he's still getting, as you said, millions of dollars of value for cards.
I feel like with baseball, unlike basketball where there's only 4 other guys on the court, or football, where you have, only a handful of guys and one player can make that big of an impact, that if he really is the greatest in his sport, then he's going to win a championship. That's kind of the expectation in, basketball and football per se. But when it comes to baseball, one man can't win it all. He can't pitch, unless you're Ohtani, but he still can't pitch every night. it's not as big of an emphasis on winning a championship when it comes to baseball as it is the other sports. You look at guys like Ernie Banks, who were multiple-time MVP and always on a last-place team, all-time great Hall of Famer, Mr. Cobb, one of the greatest Cubs of all time. He gets respect, from a Chicago market. Now, of course, if Anaheim goes or Los Angeles, they go and they win the World Series and Trout plays a big role, then of course, it's going to be a situation that's going to elevate the value. When you look at a career like Derek Jeter, I'm a Yankee fan. I grew up 20 minutes from the stadium. I went to many Jeter games. He was never even my top 5 type of player, even though he was winning and we were winning and it was exciting. His numbers, stats-wise, he was not a big home run guy. He wasn't putting up, MVP-like numbers, maybe a year or two, unlike a Mike Trout. But Jeter won, and he won often, and he won in New York. So that's why Jeter's value is where it is and why he's one of the greats. But honestly, Mike Trout's value has exceeded Jeter. So if he can win in baseball, it's only going to make it even better. But, with baseball, a lot of guys are statisticians. I mean, I like the back of the card. I want to see, is Trout going to be the best of all time statistically? So that's why I would be maybe buying Mike Trout. It's just on that speculation that he could possibly be the best of all time, as opposed to, hey, Mike Trout, yeah, he won a championship, and by the way, he's the best of all time. I think, when you can get to a category of being top 5, 10 player in your respective sport all time, the championship thing kind of goes out the window a little bit, unless, again, your team, is losing and you carry them through a World Series to elevate yourself to be that much better. But I think, that more so works out for guys like Madison Bumgarner, who's a World Series hero, his heroics, multiple-time World Series champion. You look at Mad Bum and say, okay, his career is borderline Hall of Fame, but because of what he did in the World Series, he's a Hall of Famer. So with Trout, it's kind of the other way around. It's a nice bonus, but with baseball, again, if you're an MVP 3 times and you're always in the top 5, you're going to look past the championships, and, it's not. I'm not from LA, so I'm not rooting for them to win a championship, so it doesn't impact me as much as a collector, and I'm still, interested in Mike Trout, and, I'd own some of his items for sure.
Yeah, it's more about, in baseball, as you said, the stats than the rings per se. But in basketball, as you mentioned, very much so about the rings. We're actually going to talk about a ring right now. What's the next item up?
All right, this next item here is actually the 95-96 ring from Jason Caffey, member of the Bulls, and this was their 72-10 championship season. So this is one of the most iconic, most memorable basketball seasons, and to own a Bulls ring from that season is what makes this so desirable. Not only that, Caffey actually played a role on the team as well. So we've sold other 96 Bulls rings, and they've gone, and some of them were players, not mainstream players, or bench players, sixth player, things like that, and we've gotten excess of $50,000 for those. Now, Jason Caffey playing in 75 games and an instrumental part of those 72 wins that they had that year, we should see a significant increase in value. Plus, we just had, not too long ago, the documentary about Jordan. The Bulls are really one of America's teams, so you have a lot of fans of the Bulls there, and this is one of, the 6 rings, that Jordan would have won during his career. So to be on the same court in the same finals from Jordan, all those play a role. It's tough to say if this ring is going to get to 6 figures. I think it has a chance to get close. I think we're going to end up between maybe 80 and 100, but if we get a nice kick, I could see 95 to 115. I could see a sale, in those ranges, absolutely. And what I love about this too is there's no doubt on the authenticity. This came from Jason himself. We actually sold his transcript from The Last Dance that was given out to the team at the beginning of the year. And we got over $100,000 for that document. So obviously that spurred some interest for Jason to come and actually sell his finals jersey, a couple of his rings. So I'm thinking we're going to push around 6 figures on these rings.
Well, we've talked a lot about the items and their value, but what about the people who own these items? We have a new series we're launching on YouTube about the stories of the men and women behind these amazing items on Goldin Auctions. Here is one of their incredible consignor stories. This is Consignor Confidential.
This might actually help us pay for his college and maybe a little bit more. Hi, I'm Derek Fujikawa, and welcome to Consignor Confidential. I grew up in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up mostly playing basketball. Played other sports, but wasn't very good at them. I wasn't really very good at basketball when I was little either. back then basketball cards weren't really a thing, so they were more just kind of a novelty. I bought them because I like basketball, not so much like collecting. And baseball, I actually got into baseball because of card collecting. I like numbers, so maybe it was the number side of baseball that got me hooked. I remember the 83 Topps and Fleer and Donruss cards. Those are the first like packs that I bought. So I would have been 11. And values meant nothing, right? It was just, who the good players were. There was one card shop in the whole town, so we would just go there. I'd save up my allowance or whatever and go over there and get as much as I could. Somewhere along the line, I learned about card shows. My parents would take me up there on the weekends every once in a while, drop me off, and $20 could go pretty far back then. As I got older, more into high school, just school and sports and stuff kind of took over, and I think I still collected here and there, but not nearly as much as that. On September 10th, 2003, my son was born. I was collecting here and there a little bit along the way, but it really didn't pick up again until having a son kind of brought out the kid in me again, and thought about it and said, hey, this would be fun to just have for him and kind of save it for him.
With the first pick in the 2003 NBA draft, LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade from Marquette University.
And I knew LeBron was a big name, and just happened to get crazy lucky that it was just such an incredible rookie class. I started out just buying a few here and there, and then like I said, as a little kid in me came out, I started buying more and more. I paid $1,200 for a case of Exquisite, which at the time was crazy, right? And then my daughter was born 4 years later in 2007. I'm glad I didn't invest too much in Greg Oden that year.
With the second pick in the 2007 NBA draft, Kevin Durant from the University of Texas.
Did get a lot of nice Kevin Durant rookie cards, so that really worked out well. And my thought was to save them. It wasn't, to turn around and sell them or anything like that. But so yes, I just kept them in the safe. Didn't think about selling them or anything. Just, something for him.
The business of sports card collecting is on the rise once again, especially in the age of COVID.
It brought people back to collecting to try and do something that is safe, that they can do at their home, they don't have to travel for.
So around March of this year, my son started getting his college acceptance letters. Private school in California is about 80 grand a year. First, I just kind of took an inventory of what I had and kind of looking around on eBay and just kind of falling off my chair, seeing how much some of those cards were selling for. The market's been crazy ever since the pandemic started. Kind of just doing some mental calculations in my head, thinking, this might actually help us pay for his college and maybe a little bit more. Me as a dad, this is just unbelievable. When we first started talking about college with him and thinking about private school, my heart kind of sunk because I was like, God, how are we gonna pay for this? We're gonna have to sell our house, or we could do it, but it's gonna be a real strain to our finances. Incredible Father's Day gift to me to find out that this could potentially cover that and maybe even make our lives a little more comfortable. I still can't believe that this is happening.
Now, Dave is someone who has clearly seen and done it all in this business, and not every item that gets brought to a consignor is a card or a jersey. I'd imagine, Dave, you've seen some wacky items over the year that maybe got you to take a second look. Brings us to a little segment we call Consign What. I know you brought some items today that might shock people, that people own them to begin with, and how much they might have gone for or could go for in the future.
Yeah, this first item here is, and I've heard everything, you wouldn't believe it, but this first item here is actually the dentures that belong to Ty Cobb. These were in his mouth and put on his bedside when he passed away and were taken from a family friend and then later sold. The owner of these, father was a dentist, and she loves baseball and Ty Cobb and had to buy him and snatched these up for a svelte $8,000 in the 90s in auction. Now these dentures to her are priceless. And honestly, trying to price these was just as hard. We had some intense back and forth negotiations. Initially I thought, this is crazy. But then again, that's what people love. They love different and they love crazy. And I thought, we need to go with this. And Ken is the P.T. Barnum of promotions in this hobby. And Ken immediately said, look, these absolutely need to get them. We're going to... We're going to put them on display and let everybody know, we've got Ty Cobb's teeth available. So in terms of valuing these, again, the seller wanted 6 figures plus. We have no idea where they're going to go in auction. Obviously, the seller of these now, or the current owner, her father was a dentist, so she's been in the industry, and she loved baseball and Cobb, and she grew up down south, so everything kind of seemed to make sense for her to own these. But when you own a collectible, you want to be as close to the athlete as possible. When it comes to Cobb signed baseballs, they're out there. You can go get a Cobb signed baseball. There's only one pair of teeth that have actually come out of his mouth that have been closer to Cobb than anyone. So maybe if it's your thing, it's not exactly mine. Maybe not the first thing a Cobb I would buy. I might stick to maybe a trading card, but this is a museum-worthy piece, and it's something that actually was on display in the Hall of Fame. So how cool would that be to own something on display in the Hall of Fame? And maybe you can use it. Maybe someone who owns a dental practice will use this as a gimmick when people come in. Maybe it'll belong in a Ripley's, believe it or not. Who knows where this will end up, but it'll generate a lot of interest, absolutely. And maybe we'll see 50,000. Maybe we'll see 100 in auction. We'll only know when that time comes.
Let's talk about items that are uplifting. Let's talk about one last one here that we did not give you a heads up on. This was a monumental life event for an athlete that is near and dear to everyone's heart. It is the graduation ticket for LeBron James's high school commencement exercises here. St. Vincent, St. Mary, 2003, actually the year I graduated high school as well. You haven't been prepped on this, Dave. What do you think this might fetch?
This is a tough one here because it's the graduation ceremony. It's definitely unique. Unfortunately, I probably can't go out on a limb and say, hey, we got a 5-figure item here. This is going to fetch, incredible amounts because, it is unique, but it necessarily doesn't put you maybe on the court with LeBron during a specific game or a specific moment. We sold his wedding invitation, and I think it went for like $300. Now, this is a ticket. A wedding invitation wouldn't fall in collectible value like a ticket, so there would be a premium. Regular season high school LeBron games, you could have bought those over the last couple decades for $25, $15. Now, regular season high school LeBron games are going for several hundred a piece. Now, obviously, bigger games, debut games, things like that. His NBA debut is several thousand already. Because this is unique in a graduation, though, it is not one that I've come across. It is a really cool ticket to have. If I had to put a value on it, I think, good auction, with some nice momentum, if it graded out highly, which it looks pretty good, maybe this could be, low 4 figures, But, ultimately, I think you're going to be somewhere in that several $100 range unless you get like a 9 or a 10 grade and you get a couple guys that are just had to have it. But it's a really cool item. We actually sold the diploma of Michael Jordan from UNC, and that went for almost $30,000. So, this is kind of similar to that. It's not quite LeBron's actual diploma or something, but, again, it's a unique piece. It's a one of a kind. I would definitely get that slabbed and graded. That's the first place I'd go with that. And, look, if LeBron wins another championship, or these are items that I love because you hold on to them and they just keep going up and up, unlike a trading card that can go down and kind of ultimately go upwards. Tickets, vintage collectibles that are one of a kind. This is one that I'd say hang on to for maybe 5, 10 more years. And if you grade a 9 or 10, you get a few $1,000s, and I'm sure, hopefully, it didn't cost too much on the front end. But, really, really cool piece. Maybe one day we'll offer it up.
What about, when it comes to ticket stubs or full tickets, if you have them unripped, I know a lot of people are getting into those, and those obviously because they're date specific. This one, of course, from 2003. How important is an anniversary when it comes to the value of something like this? Because we're about 2 years away from what would be the 20th anniversary of this graduation. You mentioned wanting to hang on to it for 5 or 6 years. Does it make more sense to maybe try to strike while the iron's hot, and maybe there's a lot of pieces being done about the graduation at the time? 20 years from now 2 years from now down the line. Do you put thought into that when it comes to ticket stubs as far as the value when an anniversary comes up?
Yeah, anniversaries are always important, and they're important because, like you said, they're going to maybe bring some spotlight back to, the original event. And anytime you can bring spotlight or gain media attention because of an anniversary, that's always a great time to sell. 40th anniversary of the Lake Placid Miracle on Ice. A few years ago, we got a gold medal and a jersey from a player who I've tried to sell twice in the past without success, and we tripled the expectation because there was a lot more talk and buzz going on about the 40th anniversary. Something I love about tickets are these are going away. Yeah, I think in 50 years, not as a collectible, just as a people have these nowadays. Your tickets go right on the phone. Well, every game I've been to in the last few years, I've used my phone and gone right in. So I think that while we remember tickets, it's going to be interesting to see the generation of maybe kids that aren't collecting tickets and aren't even using them over these last few years. When they become, of age, they may get into tickets and be like, wow, this is how people used to have to go to a game. Think about like a Major League Baseball Sterling Silver Pass, like a lifetime baseball pass. Like this is what you had to bring to the game, with you. And God forbid you lost it. It probably cost a few $1,000s for them to make these ornate items. So, we've really changed the way we enter games and use things. So I think tickets going away in general is going to be interesting to see where that goes in the next 5, 10, maybe even 20 years. I think it's a scarcity, and it's going to be one of those, unlike a Beanie Babies that was around for 2 years or a year, this is something that was around for decades to get in, hundreds of years, really. So, it's going to be interesting to see. But, what I like about this ticket, too, is a lot of people put them in their pockets, so they were beat up. So this one you can read perfectly. If you had it in your pocket or you folded it or creased it, a lot of these printed on tickets, too, you couldn't even read them anymore. I have tickets from Yankees games from 2005 that I can't read what game it is anymore at all because it sat in my pocket the whole game. So, that's going to be something I would suggest, grading sooner than later. But in terms of the 20th anniversary, if there is going to be a big spectacle on that is definitely a decent time. This is something that I know there's a lot of fundraisers and charities that went on, in the Akron area for LeBron. This could be a piece that maybe finds its way, in a few years to some sort of raffle or charity and ends up selling for tenfold, what it could because someone wants to own that piece of the history 20 years ago. So I think in the right setting, anything can over exceed expectation.
When you talk about ticket stubs not being a part of culture anymore, you're definitely right. I went to a concert the other night that I'd love to have the ticket stub for, but I don't have it. I now see, though, that Ticketmaster will allow you to now pay extra to get the ticket stub mailed to you if you want. Is that something that maybe you'd recommend people do if they're going to an NBA Finals game or going to a debut game for a big player like a Zion Williamson or something? Pay the extra money, make sure you get the ticket, don't just have it on your phone. Because I went to Derek Jeter's 3,000th hit game, but I believe I got the ticket on StubHub and it came as like a big ugly piece of paper. So I wish I would have somehow been able to get the option to buy the ticket. Is that something you'd recommend? Because maybe 20 years down the line, you're one of only a few hundred people that did that instead of the 30,000 who went to the game.
Absolutely. I think part of going to the game and watching it and seeing something historical is knowing you've got that ticket stub in your pocket and it's going to be worth some money. A few years back, I actually was in Oakland. We were at a card show, and we see that the A's are playing the Red Sox. And as a Yankee fan, I like to see the Red Sox lose. And, I actually got to watch them get no hit from Sean Manaea, pitched a no-hitter that night, just by chance at the game. We did not have tickets. Ended up ordering them after the game, getting them shipped, and I'll tell you what, they were mint, too, coming in after the game that way, so it's better than being in your pocket. But I would definitely advise, especially NBA Finals, or a big opportunity like that. These tickets are worth big. I went to the 96 World Series. I have the ticket stub. I went with my father. It's just a nice memory to have that as well. So I think having the ticket's going to keep that memory there, and kind of bring you back to that moment. And that's what collecting's all about, getting back to that moment, living in the experience and saying, oh, I remember that. I got to own something like that, and buying that finals ticket or something from someone. And I think there's an immediate value right on a Super Bowl or an NBA Finals ticket. Those are immediately almost $100 tickets. So if it's a few dollars to get the upcharge or whatever it might be, it's definitely worthwhile, a worthy investment. But it's something that if you don't get the grade and you get the high grade, you're going to cost yourself some money. So it's something I'd recommend right away getting graded as well, so it displays nicer in your collection and is also easier to sell when the time does come.
Now, we're going to get out of here in a minute, Dave, but for our wild card, I'd love to ask you about a part of your career that some people watching this might not know about. But, you know, seeing as I also host the Challenge Mania podcast, one of the biggest reality TV podcasts, I would be remiss, and I feel like some of that audience might be annoyed that I didn't bring up the fact that you dabbled in reality TV a little bit yourself, Dave.
Yeah, I definitely dabbled in reality TV for quite some time. I was always into entertainment and acting. You know, I was in a play in college, and I was a film minor. I lived near New York City, so when I got the opportunity to bump into somebody and get a casting call for what was going to be dubbed as maybe the next Bachelorette, Bachelor-type show, you know, I jumped on it. The show was I Love New York. It was a spin-off from Flavor Flav, Flavor of Love. I was 12-pack on the show. I was in great shape back then. This is going back 12, 13 years now. And, you know, I made it to the final 5, and, you know, it was an amazing exposure. I got to meet a lot of cool people, traveled the world, really, and hosted events for 3 years. I did I Love Money, which was kind of the VH1 All-Star spin-off of that, like a challenge show. Made it about 8 out of 11 episodes there. And then I got the opportunity to go on Daisy of Love, which was a spin-off of Rock of Love. So I really, I made it to the finals on Daisy's show, and I was single, and I was really, you know, looking for, you know, potential girlfriend on that one. Thought I was going to get my own show, and unfortunately that didn't work out. But, you know, always did the collectibles throughout the whole process. On Daisy of Love, I was actually on the phone with my employee or my partner for the auction house that I was running, and every day he's working on a consignment call. It's just like I'm in the office now. He'd be calling the show up, and he'd be like, hey, I got this Larry Bird Games jersey. What do you think it's worth? And I remember the producers even coming to me and being like, hey, man, like, you got a lot of stuff going on back home. And I was just always passionate about this. As soon as the shows were over, I was running my auction and kind of doing that a little bit. And, you know, some people kind of caught wind of it and knew that I was in the hobby a little, but wild times, you know, crazy part of my life. I wouldn't take it back. I'm glad I'm in the entertainment business now. It's a little different than, you know, maybe in the insurance industry, going and trying to, you know, sell a life insurance policy and having the exposure of being on, you know, national TV. But, you know, it's something that, you know, I was happy to have the experience with it. Wish it could have gone even further, but I love waking up every day, knowing where I'm going to work and, you know, what I'm going to make, and not having to deal with uncertainty because, you know, there's a lot. People would call my house regularly after those shows. They were calling my parents' house. They were, you know, I mean, you got to deal with a lot of negativity as well, especially the type of shows, you know, we were on, not shows I would necessarily watch myself. Went on tour, met my wife on tour. I have 3 beautiful children now. And, you know, hopefully here at Goldin we can get creative with some different production elements, and I can still at least maybe be in front of the cameras a little bit while doing what I love to do. I mean, you know, perfect combination, and, you know, things have seemed to work out pretty well for me, so I'm very fortunate for that.
All right, everybody, we want to thank Dave for joining us this week on Inside the Hobby. Be sure to check out GoldinAuctions.com if you do want to participate in the June premium auction that closes this weekend. Be sure to tune in next week where I will be joined by another personality from the world of cards, collectibles, and memorabilia. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Inside the Hobby.